everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Number One Comics Podcast. I'm Jonah, and with me is
Bill.
Usually I say your name, and then I had to say your own name this time.
That's
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine.
Welcome, Bill. Thanks for joining me again.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it as always.
Yeah.
Special shout out to the Field of Geeks Network for helping us put this together. Special shout out to Raven X for the intro music. Really appreciate everything that you guys do. Appreciate everyone who's taken the time to watch these episodes and follow us on the Field of Geeks Network. Keep that going. Looking to grow this. We got like 1 million subscribers now. Not quite. I think.
Man, we need all the subscribers we can get so we can, feed my comic book, my growing comic book.
Yeah. Someone asked me, they're like, "Oh, you're gonna quit your day job?" No, I can't. Not anytime soon. But anyway, once Field of Geeks establishes itself as like, an official startup, and then we get ownership in that, and then we go public.
Yeah.
Then we'll talk.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Anyway, tonight we're talking about 2018's Justice League Dark from DC Comics. This was published, cover date on this, September 2018. $3.99 was the cover price. So really, I guess over the last, 6 years, they've remained relatively consistent from a cover price perspective. I know last week we talked Wolverine #1, and that was a $4.99 cover price. Mm-hmm. But that was also a beefier comic, too. I mean, that was 30 pages of comic book content. A story there. The writer on this Justice League series, James Tynion IV. I hope I'm saying that last name correctly. Probably not. And the artist was Alvaro Martinez Bueno. I'm pretty sure I'm saying all of that correctly, which is rare for me when it comes to names. When I picked this issue up, I was getting back into reading comics. Mm-hmm. I'd taken a long hiatus between like 2011 and then 2018. I was kind of getting back into comics. So Justice League has never really been a huge draw for me.
Right.
Most things magical, especially within the DC universe, are a big draw for me. I really love DC's magical characters, and so just throwing them on the cover or having a comic book title kind of around them is enough to get me to at least pick up that first issue. Yeah. In particular, the more obscure characters like Detective Chimp, who's seen on the cover here, along with Wonder Woman and Zatanna, Man-Bat, and Swamp Thing. I mean, these are, I think, really cool characters. The only character I am admittedly not a fan of is Wonder Woman. I've never been a fan of Wonder Woman. I've never read a Wonder Woman comic. I've read her in issues of JLA. I've read her in this series as well. I like her just fine as a character, especially in this, but she's never been somebody that's really been like a huge draw for me as a character. What's your take on Wonder Woman?
I'd agree with that. I'm not like, the funny thing is like, about the only thing that would draw me to Justice League would be Batman and Green Lantern. Yeah. Because I like them on their own. Mm-hmm. But, the whole dynamic of like Justice League never really made much sense to me because if Superman's supposed to be all powerful and like, invincible and stuff, why does he need, 10 other people on his team? I've always
admittedly been more of a Marvel person anyway, so I've just never had a chance to really get too deep into the Wonder Woman mythos.
I'd agree with that.
What I like about this, again from the cover, this featured cast is very reminiscent of like my childhood days when I would be like playing with my superhero toys and I would just randomly throw characters together that had no business being together for the most part. And that's kind of what I like about this type of a story. In fact, a lot of titles like that are going to be more appealing to me if you put a title together and you throw in a bunch of characters that don't make sense.
Right.
Like we talked about the last episode, we talked about the new Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And how Ghost Rider and Wolverine and the Hulk and Spider-Man don't necessarily make a ton of sense to be on a team together.
Right.
But, and again, I still haven't read that, so I don't know how it worked out. Or you look at, another example of that I'd recently had been reading back through, very similar to kind of like a Justice League Dark, is it's Savage Avengers. I don't know if you have read that title or seen that title. We'll talk about that title because I think it's very cool. And there's a couple of volumes of it, but one of those is, the team it consists of Conan the Barbarian. As for one, along with say Wolverine and a handful of other very obscure characters. So we'll talk about that one, I'm sure, because I did enjoy that. The one thing too that really surprised me in this book, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it later, is Man-Bat being part of this, because I only know of him from like the DC animated, the Batman animated cartoon series as a Batman villain. But it's cool that he's introduced to this, even though I never really saw him as having much ties to the kind of magic side of the DC universe. This is actually the second volume of this title. There was a Justice League Dark that was part of the New 52 initiative back in 2011. I hadn't read or haven't seen any of that, so couldn't tell you what that's about, but I'm sure I'll check it out. I think the trades are out there that I was considering picking up. Let's go ahead and walk through a synopsis of this. Spoilers are going to follow, and then we'll give you our take on it. So our story here opens with Zatanna performing on stage in her father's old theater. It's a simple trick of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, and that turns into chaos when she unleashes a multi-tendrilled and multi-mouthed monster instead. The monster quickly turns on the audience, and there doesn't really seem to be anything that Zatanna can really do to try and stop it. Now, luckily, she's lent a hand, shield and spear, by one of DC's top three, famous JLA Wonder Woman. Any magic that Zatanna attempts to use backfires, like trying a spell to burn down the monster only results in the monster spitting fire from its mouths. Wonder Woman recommends a more physical approach, so Zatanna uses a Zippo lighter to burn the hat, and the monster turns to dust. Wonder Woman states that magic is broken and tries to recruit Zatanna to join her, but Zatanna refuses. We then cut to the outside of Winter's Gate Manor, where a gathering is taking place. This is a who's who of magical characters within the DC universe. Zatanna is deep in thought when John Constantine interrupts. They discuss that magic across the board is going haywire. Zatanna believes that the others within the manor will be able to help. Constantine, on the other hand, he says he's not even allowed to get in the door, so they're not even inviting him to the party. We then cut to the Oblivion Bar, which is a literal bar/pub. It exists in a pocket dimension outside of reality. Wonder Woman and Detective Chimp discuss their current magical quandary. She shares with Bobo, that's Detective Chimp's real name is Bobo, some of the recent horrors that she's seen. Magicians ripped open from the inside. Magic is out of balance. The bodies have been taken to the Hall of Justice for analysis, and Detective Chimp wants to take a closer look at them himself. Back at Winter's Gate Manor, Jason Blood, he is the human host to the demon Etrigan. He leads a discussion with several of the DCU's magical beings. This includes Deadman, Zoriel, Phantom Stranger, and more. They acknowledge a war on magic. It's mentioned that the public heroes have gathered a Justice League Dark, so to speak. Jason Blood insists that this is a magical problem and is going to require a magical solution. As the group chats, Zatanna notices a small potted plant keeping an eye on the room. Now, we then cut to beneath the Hall of Justice, where Wonder Woman leads Bobo to the bodies of the bodies that she'd mentioned previously. The rest of Justice League Dark, which is really just Wonder Woman and former Batman foe Man-Bat. Man-Bat has been working for the government, atoning for his past misdeeds. He appears small, almost childlike at first. He leads Wonder Woman and Bobo to the bodies, which are all horrifically mangled. Back at Winter's Gate, or actually outside of Winter's Gate, after that meeting has taken place, Zatanna is confronting Swamp Thing in Salem. She realizes that he's the one that was eavesdropping on the meeting at the manor, and is not being more active considering that magic is dying. They discuss the Tree of Wonder, which has appeared in Salem, Massachusetts, and he states that the tree is a cosmic beacon to measure the life force of the world, but now it's trying to become something else. And that something that it's becoming wants to speak to Zatanna. It appears as Zatanna's father, with a message that the original owners of magic are returning, and with them a darkness. And that darkness is going to infect and burn out all living beings. Another vision appears to Zatanna with a threat. Now, back under the Hall of Justice, the cadavers spring back to life. And Wonder Woman's suggestion, Man-Bat injects himself with his classic formula, transforming him from his more meek-looking self that we'd seen previously into a larger, more monstrous version that I remember from the Batman the Animated Series when I saw him there. While the cadavers approach, Wonder Woman calls for Man-Bat to fly Bobo out of there. But before they can retreat, they're joined by Zatanna and Swamp Thing. Zatanna has a dire message for Wonder Woman. Magic is going to die, and along with it, all of humanity. And one of them is going to bring about its destruction. Dun, dun, dun. To be continued. What are your thoughts, Bill? I know you probably had no idea what was going on leading up to this.
Not really, no.
Did you have any idea what was happening within the story itself?
Parts of it were a little bit,
you're like,
hard to follow, but
what's with this tree? Who cares?
At the same time, though, so my whole introduction to these guys was Injustice, which I know is like kind of a alternate universe kind of thing, but the comics leading up to the video game Injustice, focused heavily on like the magic users, because Superman is weak against magic. So I was pretty familiar with them, but I'd never like actually read anything about them in the comics or anything like that. But it was intriguing to me.
Yeah.
I do like it.
So I collected this series back in 2018, and I have the entire run of it. It wasn't until preparing for this episode, though, that I actually like sat down and read it.
Oh, okay.
And I'm actually currently reading the rest of the series.
Nice.
And I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a good series. In fact, I don't know why I've waited so long to read it, because it is weird in all the right ways. When it comes to magic, like I said, I've always preferred DC's World of Magic over Marvel's. In particular, its characters like Detective Chimp. They're a big reason for that. I'm not traditionally a Wonder Woman fan, as I'd mentioned, but I did like her here. I like her in kind of this more of a supporting role for whatever reason. I'm not being misogynistic. It's not about that. It's just the character has never really landed with me for one reason or another. But here she is. I think Tinian did a really good job of fleshing out these characters for new readers with some backstory on Zatanna. You get a little backstory on Bobo and how he came to own the bar that they're hanging out at. And you even get a little bit of a backstory on Man-Bat. And not that I don't know that there's a lot of backstory there to tell, but you get a little bit about each of these characters, which I think is really cool. There are a few panel layouts that ran across 2-page spreads that I had to read a few times to ensure I was following it correctly.
Right.
I'm just so used to reading, this page and then this page. And so it kind of threw me a little bit. But even aside from that, I think the art was pretty solid throughout. And was it just me, or did Swamp Thing kind of look like Rob Zombie?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got a Rob Zombie vibe from Swamp Thing's appearance. This issue, I think, did a good job of balancing the horror elements that I want in a supernatural DC book with sort of the superheroing that I also want in a DC Heroes book. Yeah. So it made for an overall good read. I enjoyed the cameos and hope to see more from, some of these characters like Constantine and the Demon Etrigan. It's also, always cool to see characters like Man-Bat in a different light. I love when you can take such a one-note villain and make him cool or different or interesting.
Exactly.
And I think that's always a win for me. So after in this he was kind of like X-Men's Beast, right, of the team, and I thought that was neat. After reading the issue, like I said, I was really excited to go and continue reading it, and I think I've almost completed the series at this point because it ran for about like 28 issues or so. Okay. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about a little bit about what comes next. And any other thoughts you had on the series as a whole?
So
or the issue as a whole, rather.
So this whole run, is it all one continuous story, or is it kind of like
it is? So where I'm at right now, it's still kind of this continuous story. There are other subplots and other stories that get introduced. There's other villains that come into play.
Right.
You know, the one they mention him by name in this one a couple of times, which it's escaping me, but he's kind of the main villain through like this first story arc. Okay. And then there's other ones that they'll bring into it as well.
Okay.
As far as what comes next, you know, this first volume, or the first volume rather, that I alluded to at the beginning of the episode, that ran for about 40 issues. This second volume ran for 29 issues. Okay. And so it ran from July of 2018 to February of 2021. The team would continue to appear in the main Justice League series as a backup feature. And then they had a few guest appearances as well. So they continued to make some appearances. There are several collected editions of the Justice League Dark Stories. I would recommend that anyone who's interested in checking out this corner of the DC universe, you know, pick those up. I think I would had them in my Amazon shopping cart, that series I haven't read yet that I'm probably going to pull the trigger on. Right. Outside of comics, there are 2 animated films. You've got Justice League Dark, and you've got Justice League Dark Apocalypse War.
Yep.
The latter is actually currently available on Max, because I was watching it just the other night. Going back to 2012, you know, there were rumors of a Justice League Dark live-action film with Guillermo del Toro attached to it. That initiative, though, it's long since stalled.
Right.
Which I think is a shame, because with del Toro on it, and with the characters that they can pull from, I think that would have the potential to be pretty fantastic. Mm-hmm. So I would love to see, with kind of this new James Gunn world that the DC movies are existing in, if they were to, like, you know, reignite that project. I think that'd be pretty sweet.
I would agree with that. I mean, I know there's a Swamp Thing movie in the works that's kind of like further down the line. Yep. I would like to see, if James Gunn adapts anybody, I would love to see him adapt Constantine.
Yes.
Now I know we have the Keanu Reeves movie,
Constantine, which is a very different character,
very much so,
than what you would get in the comics.
So, like, after I read Injustice and like got familiar with Constantine there, then I went and saw the Justice League Dark and Apocalypse War and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I want a movie that's just centered around like this Constantine.
Yeah. Who would you cast as your live action Constantine?
Oh man. You're really putting me on the spot here. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to it'd probably be somebody who's like naturally kind of has that like Constantine accent.
Yep. I'm going to go to my heterosexual man crush, Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Oh,
I think he would be a fabulous Constantine. He's even got the accent already, because he would be British.
That would be great.
So,
yeah,
he would get my vote. I would cast him in a heartbeat.
Oh, definitely.
So, speaking of which, this is a weird aside. Have you seen the most recent trailer for Kraven?
I have.
Which comes out soon later.
I have.
God, I want to see that movie so bad.
I do too.
It could be terrible, but I want to see it so bad.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking for it's one of the few Fox Marvel ones, or Sony Marvel ones, sorry, that I've been actually looking forward to.
Yeah.
I've kind of like lost my faith in Venom, even though he's like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, I have no interest in seeing the most recent one.
But yeah, I mean,
I never saw the last one. I never saw Carnage.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
But Aaron Taylor Johnson's one of my favorite actors. Loved him as Quicksilver.
Yep.
I liked him a hell of a lot more than I did Evan Peters, but that's,
Yeah, that wasn't Evan's fault.
It wasn't. No.
No. I agree with you.
But
I'm sure we will, as part of a Field of Geeks episode, we'll probably do a Kraven review at some point.
I'm sure we will.
After that comes out. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
And also stay tuned for our next episode. We are going to be talking about Solo, not Han Solo, and a more obscure Solo.
Or that Solo Star Wars film. We're not talking about that either.
So There's some 90s cheese that we're going to be diving into.
Yes.
So good. So anyway, that's all we have for you for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it as always. Be sure to check us out on Facebook at The Number One Comics Podcast. Feel free to send us an email as well at The Number One Comic Podcast at gmail.com. Be sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe. We're part of the Field of Geeks Network, as I'd mentioned. Special thanks to everybody who helps us put this together. I'm looking at you, Josh. We really appreciate it. We'll see you guys next time. Have a great night.